this has made a really big difference, especially in my faith and in the way that I view the world and other people, and especially the way I receive the grace of God. When you think of that type A personality, I'm not really type A per se.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's
Fair.
Do you ever feel you don't get out what you're putting in? All your hopes and efforts are all in vain. Who will pick you up when you've lost everything? Does it all become for granted with a wedding ring? Oh, there must be more. There must be another way. There must be conscious, different things in different ways. There must be love. There must be a reason, and a little bit of faith has got to come my way.
Hi all. Thank you so much for clicking on this video, walking through this journey with me, listening to these people's stories. I encourage you to go to the first video that I put out as an explanation and a purpose and a motivation for why I'm doing this and the perspective that Christians should have with the Enneagram. The link will be down in the description if you want to check that out, and I encourage you to do so. But I just wanted to say hi and introduce these episodes for you. In this episode, I got to interview 6 different people that identify as the Enneagram number 1. And it really was really cool to hear their different perspectives on how they deal with different things and the information that the Enneagram presents. I hope that these stories and what people talk about will inspire you, encourage you, and point you back to Christ, and especially to remind you that you are not alone. So, without further ado, I present the Enneagram number 1.
This preview is going to be the essential message that this number received often as a child, and it was a wounding message, or a message that told them they're not enough, they're not worthy, it's not okay. And then I will also give you the essential good message that they need to hear, the thing that their hearts are longing to hear. For ones, the essential wounding message that you heard is that it is not okay to make a mistake. And the message that your heart is longing to hear from all kinds of places is that you are good. You are good. Ones want to be the good girl, the good boy, the good person. They want to be right. They want to follow the rules. They are very good students. In class, teachers love them because they're so reliable. I know that Johnny or Susie will do what I say because they're like, yes, I want to be good. They're really good at reforming. They see the world as it should be. They have this beautiful vision, and they work hard to align groups, organizations, classes, anything that they're a part of. They are actively steering the ship in the direction of goodness and rightness. But they can also tend to become workaholics.
Yeah.
Because it's this is how I have to throw myself into this work or this reforming or this, and I know people don't like this word, but the perfecting, or being a perfectionist.
Right.
Never reaching a state of feeling good about something is really hard for them to do. And they really wrestle with people who are wrong according to them. They wrestle with encountering them in productive ways because they can just see and categorize the world. And they're like, nope, that's not it. They are not asking you to do anything that they have not already asked themselves to do. They are not barking at you over something they have not already barked at themselves about. So ones are notorious for having a really strong inner critic. They have a voice in the back of their head that is telling them they're not good enough, they did this wrong, they did this wrong, they need to do that better, they need to get that A, they need to get that A+, they need to be exceeding expectations. And a deep understanding of their wrongness. Like when they get something wrong, they feel it deeply. That can be very devastating. So they can encounter that. They have a hard time with authoritative figures criticizing them.
Yeah.
You know, I gotta be on my report card. This speaks to the essence of who they are.
Okay.
They are not good enough. And I in that grade, I have told them that in their deepest soul, they feel that really deeply. They tend to be like the heroes of the story. They're going to save the day. They're the Martin Luthers, the reformers, and which is great. You know, like that's huge. And we need those kinds of movers in our society. But what I do also like about ones is they're very, they're in the present. They're present focused. So they can be in a place really authentically with people. And they can be real on teams, great leaders. You're on a bus that's going somewhere for sure if there's a one at the wheel. And that's a good area of growth. To have that reaffirming, I am good. My identity is not tied up in how much I follow all the rules.
All right. Hi, my name is Alyssa Newton. I'm 26 years old. I'm from Rockford, Illinois. I work as a recreational specialist at Rosecrans Griffin Williamson campus. It's a adolescent rehab facility for substance abuse and mental health.
Right. So hi, I'm Stephen Hanna, and I am originally from Texas. Moved here 6 years ago to Cincinnati to pursue a master's in voice at the conservatory here, and for the past 4 years now have been singing professionally in the fields of like opera, choir, recitals, like classical music stages, things of that nature.
So my name is Josh May. I'm originally from Tip City, Ohio, which is a bit north of Dayton. I'm currently in my 5th and senior year studying electrical engineering at the University of Cincinnati.
All right, I'm Josh Laborious. I am from Warner Robins, Georgia, but currently am in St. Louis. I'm a seminary student, a 4th year seminary student, thanks be to God. I'm almost done with school.
So my name is Chen Yu Chu in Chinese, which is supposed to be Chu Chen Yu. Well, actually Qiu Cheng Yu in Chinese name. And my English name is Joe. I usually go by Joe. And I'm from Taiwan. Now I am working as a language instructor in a university in Korea, and this is a theological university. So I'm teaching Mandarin Chinese and a little bit of English to the Department of Missionary in Chinese. How I know Laura Lee? I was born to know her.
My name is Kathy Lewis. My phone number is, my address. I won't give you my social security. I've lived in Colorado for most of my life, so I'm a Colorado girl. What I do, the most important thing is my relationship with God, and I spend various means throughout the day doing that. And then I'm a musician, and I have a couple of students.
For the sake of today's talk, we're kind of going under the guise that I may be a 1.
I'm number 1.
And my Enneagram number is 1.
And my number most recently is 1.
My number is, we just decided on it, is type 1.
Deadly sin of the 1 is anger. Would you agree with that? And if so, how do you deal with that deadly sin?
Yes, I would agree with that for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see parts of that. In terms of like the angry at seeing that there is bad in the world and whatnot, I don't know if I see it so much as I don't know if I get like anger in terms of that regard.
When I do get those feelings, I don't always recognize it as what it is, and I kind of like cover up the emotion and like deal with it in unhealthy ways. So I would say that when I do feel it, it's not the best for sure. I don't think I would have necessarily like gone to that as my go-to deadly sin. I guess like I would have thought there would be something else.
I'm not a the type of person that blows up very often. But I would say that pretty constantly there's kind of a little boiling anger about something going on for me, and whether that is justified or not.
I would not disagree with that. I'm really, through practice, I think I'm very good at keeping it internalized, however, which from a psychological perspective, I recognize isn't super healthy. But yeah, there's a response to anger, especially when I see things that I guess I would perceive as wrong or unjust.
I really don't have any ways to like recall or relate to anger, because anger is like one of the things that I feel the most indifferent to. Like basically it doesn't really happen a lot in my head or in my life. However, it could be that anger is so strong that I couldn't act on it. I couldn't, I decided not to act on it, and I decided that the anger doesn't really help you a lot along the way when you're angry because of the injustice, but the injustice is still there and there's no way for you to beat it, or there's no way for you to change it, there's no way for you to alter it. You end up being very helpless, and then you think, oh, anger is a useless emotion.
I don't know that that's really been a big issue in my life. I know when I was raising my children, there are things where I got angry that to this day I regret, and I have apologized to them. I actually deal with anger quite well. Yeah, I get angry at myself.
I feel like I would more quickly go to brokenness than to anger. It more so going into how do we fix it? How do we deal with it?
When I see things on the news, when I see things on Facebook, when I speak to people and I hear these things that I perceive as wrong or unjust, I feel that anger kind of rising up inside me. I'm pretty good at not letting it come out. I'm pretty good at not snapping at people, but I definitely feel it, and I definitely imagine all the things I would say if I was to voice my anger.
I'm very angry with things out in, the country. I also know that the Lord has established his throne in the heavens, and his sovereignty rules over all, and that my anger isn't really going to change anything, but I do pray a lot. God gave us a beautiful country where we could be free to worship him.
And I would say this is kind of the biggest thing that the Enneagram has done for me. Like I said, I've always known in my mind that I'm saved by grace through faith. What I didn't realize was that I was trying to still earn it anyway. And part of that is just that constant anger with myself. I'm still doing the wrong thing.
Sometimes I can kind of get a little like inwardly angry at work sometimes, particularly where it's a high velocity day or time of day. And then I make a silly mistake, and then I can kind of get into my head, and like anger can brew up in that regard.
When I plan to do a routine, it's very detailed and organized. But the problem with that is if I don't consistently do it exactly the way it should be done for day after day, then I get really discouraged, and I end up just wanting to not do it at all, because I'd rather not do it and do something else instead of do it like half-heartedly or like half correctly.
I would say probably the most aggressive, the hottest that the anger gets is when it is at myself. I don't have a high tolerance for failure, for me not doing what I should do. And I realize, I'm a broken sinner. I do need Christ in everything I do. That doesn't mean I get any less upset with myself when I fail to do what I ought to be doing.
And then the more that anger in myself is there, the more easily I am frustrated with the mistakes of other people as well. If I'm in a place of self-hatred, I come into work and my coworker doesn't follow through with something, or my coworker is expressing some complaints or concerns or something like that, my initial thought is just kind of a judgmental place, and I'll go to that anger piece, like, why do you think you have problems? Our kids have so many other problems that they're dealing with, like, that's not even a real thing,
I try to be very clear, though, and very pointed in how I relate to my coworkers, though, because then it becomes a deal of like, look at my coworker over there. They're just standing there taking people's orders, jerk. And so it can go into that mentality if you're not careful, I feel. And so I try to be very careful, but I've been very clear with all my coworkers, and they understand. I'm like, if I start to get in that place, it's not at you. I will never be mad at any one of you for messing up or for this or that at work. If I'm in that kind of place, it's at myself because of something that I've done.
Sometimes I have like a mindset where I don't want to turn something in until it's like as perfect as it can be. And if I'm working with other people in a team and I see them not like having that same level of accountability like with their work, I sometimes get really frustrated instead of doing what I should do, maybe by like working with them or teaching them different things.
If there's a situation that triggers me, I think about the situation, analyze it, and I try to identify my feeling and try to identify why I'm angry about it. And if I couldn't identify, I talk to a friend, I tell them the situation, and they will tell me, oh, I understand why you're angry because this and that. And then I just come around in my head already before I actually act it out for the most of the times.
I think like being aware of it is really good. I think I tend to not forgive myself for things I've done in the past. And I think it's kind of normal, I guess, because I've always felt this way of like thinking of things I did a couple of years ago and constantly beating myself up about it. And that just seems normal to me. But hearing that I'm more prone to be angry at myself, it might help me to kind of look back at that and try to change that way of thinking.
Society is broken. And me getting angry isn't going to fix that. I'm not called to get angry at it. I'm called to bring the gospel to it. I think the anger towards society has transitioned to more of a recognition of hurt that needs a healing word, not an angry one.
Think about Jesus in the temple. You think about any of those times in the Bible where God is angry. He's angry for a reason. There are things in the world to get angry about, right? Like, the world is not the way that it should be. The world is not the way that it's made to be. So there are, I truly believe that anger can be righteous. When my anger becomes something that does not allow space for grace, I think that's where it's unrighteous and I'm not using it well. But I think when anger is motivating me toward justice and reconciliation and things like that, and which I think it can actually do, I think that's what righteous anger looks like.
The basic fear and desire. The basic fear is being bad or being corrupt, and the basic desire is being good and having integrity. Does this sound familiar? And if so, why do you think that is?
Yes, very much so.
I think that the basic fear of being bad or being corrupt, I think being bad, I definitely resonate with that a lot. I feel like always growing up, my parents wanted me to be like a straight A student, and I always had that fear of like not living up to that. I guess that's kind of good because it pushed me to get really good grades in college as well. The more I thought about it, I'm constantly like measuring my worth based on how I am compared to other people. And if I'm like average or below average in some aspect of like how good are like my morals, or how good do I treat other people, or how's my outlook on life, or other things like that, I feel really bad about myself. So I'm always like seeking to be like in the higher level and I guess better than other people. And it like doesn't sound like good to like say that, but like
Yeah.
I guess like being honest, that's like how my brain works. So
My desire is to do the right thing, and it sounds kind of like I don't
Like,
know.
oh, I'm
It
so
sounds
cool.
like a goody for sure.
Yeah.
But it does really cause some very unhealthy things sometimes, because if you're always trying to do what's right and you think you're improving on it, and you look around at the world and you feel like nobody else is doing this thing, it's very easy to become judgmental, and I would say it puts us in a very easy spot to be hypocritical very often, right? First of all, I'm not going to have compassion for that. Second of all, I'm not going to be open-minded to any other perspective than my own. I think it can show up in a really unhealthy way. But what I appreciate about that we bring is that that desire for justice, and the desire for even just peace and goodness and things like that. So.
The next question is based on the triads, the one that you talked about with the head and the gut and the heart triad. And you, as a one, are in the gut triad. It doesn't mean that you don't have a head, you don't have a heart, but
Sure.
you're driven more by that. And you can disagree with that as well if you like. The one is driven by anger, because we're talking about anger, and ask the question, what is wrong here? They live life by instincts and gut, and they're honest and direct. The one internalizes this anger. Do you think that this is true about your life, based on kind of what I just said and what you kind of know about the triads?
A little bit of my background is that I spent some time in Australia backpacking right out of college, and then after that, I was teaching English in Taiwan, and then I traveled to Vietnam. I taught English there for a semester, and after that, I went to the U.S. for 2 years, working on my master's degree and also teaching. And now I'm in Korea. So basically, those are the roller coasters of the cultures, basically. However, the reason why I'm bringing it up is because I think I resonate more about being honest. I didn't really think that I was an honest and straightforward person before I went to the US. I think that at the beginning, if you are trying to be very straightforward about, oh, I don't like that, or I do like that, people would be like, oh my gosh, this is so intimidating. But at the end, in the long term, the relationships are gonna actually, in my mind, it's gonna work better because people don't have to guess you. So basically, I've learned that from the culture, and I think that part of me was unleashed. And I was like, oh, I just click with that part of the culture, that aspect of the culture, and I took it in, I internalized it, and I was encouraged to do it. And then coming back to Asia, that was very confusing because then I had to kind of just like switch my mindset and say, oh, wait a minute. No, things are different now. People don't always appreciate you being so straightforward. Yeah. I'm still on the way of learning how to be subtle and how to be, like taking other people's feelings into consideration when I'm trying to set the boundaries.
I feel like sometimes I can be a little bit like over eager with constructive criticism, either with myself or with other people. So, which may be kind of from the same base point, again, of just a rewarding of what is wrong here, which implies what's wrong here, what needs to be fixed or to be improved, like the faith aspect and figuring out how does Christianity play in, how do this and the Enneagram, how do these worlds kind of interplay? Because theoretically it's a balance, and we talk about your head ruling your heart and things of that nature. That also talks about like how we respond as Christians to situations or to ourselves or to people within the faith or outside the faith and whatnot. I think there's a way those play together, and I wonder if that's the instinctive or the what word did you use, the gut center. I feel like that definitely does play in.
So the stress and security numbers, what that means is in times of stress or insecurity or not being confident or unhealth, a number can move to the unhealthy sides of one number. And then when they're healthy or confident or secure, they go to the healthier sides or the good sides of another number. So, for example, when your number is in stress or is unhealthy, they go to the negative sides of the 4. And when they are healthy and confident, they go to the positive sides of the 7. You can react and agree or disagree with kind of what I'll present to you. And the negative sides of the 4 is there's a lot of self pity and sadness, and it can get pretty dark with the negative sides of the 4 because they are so self-involved, and they can withdraw, and they can think badly about themselves. Obviously, their deadly sin is jealousy, so they can get very jealous easily, and insecure and more self-conscious when they are stressed or in an unhealthy place. Would you agree if that is you when you are a stressed or unhealthy place? Does any of those sound familiar, or you can relate with any of
However,
those?
where I resonate with the 4 is when I get stressed, my insecure tendencies, my tendency to kind of my low self-esteem and stuff like that shoots up. When I'm feeling stressed, I will kind of withdraw as far as like my own feeling. I'll be present in other people's lives and I'll kind of seek ways to help them, but you won't hear much from me about how I'm feeling. I do withdraw, and that's unfortunate because that means I'm not getting any support for the low self-esteem, the feeling I'm not good enough, I'm not whatever enough.
Kind of insight of things that you said so far that has more struck home with me is the thing about stress resulting in depression, and because that's just been it's always been a battle. It's always been there waiting for me.
Yeah.
And it's always been a commitment not to go there. I'll send you this song. Did I ever show you the Lord of All Creation? I think I did. I printed it on PDF this morning, so I'll send it to you.
Okay. Yeah.
That is God's answer to my insecurity, and it's interesting that the Lord gave me the words to the second verse many years after I had written the song, but the words to the second verse He gave me just 2 days before I went in for that big surgery, which turned my life upside down. So basically, stress and security is one of the balancing things, like a teeter-totter.
When you are secure, you go to the 7, and the 7 is known as, doesn't mean that you become a 7. It just, you exhibit certain characteristics of what a 7 is, and a 7 is known as the enthusiast, and they really love life, and they want to do a lot of things, and they are very positive people and want to bring joy to the world and hope and life. They're when they are healthy, they can be awesome cheerleaders and awesome people that can root for people and also just bring brightness to a room. And they enjoy doing a lot of things and being in a lot of activities, and just bringing happiness and joy to the world. So do you think that when you are secure and healthy that you can resonate?
Yeah, that all resonates. I would just say all of the above.
Okay.
My tendency when I am, I guess, secure, happy, healthy, whatever, is to look toward the next goal, because I'm looking for what's the next task, whether that be like what's the next problem to be solved, or what's something we can work towards preemptively. What problem am I going to prevent from happening tomorrow? Definitely happens here in academia, is when I get to that place of security or confidence, etc. There's a little bit of paranoia there that I forgot something. Okay. Kind of like this attitude of, I feel like I've finished everything and then I'm happy. That means I messed up. Like, where's the mistake? Where's the thing I forgot to do? Where's the 100 pages of reading I didn't get to?
Yeah. One of the things that I'm doing is I'm bringing in Bible characters for each number. Obviously, we can't say that these people or these characters were like numbers. We can't, because they're gone and we can't really. But I'm bringing them in because they, represent some characteristics of the numbers, and just kind of to see like how people feel like they can relate to these characters. So most of the numbers I have two, but actually one is the only one that I just have one character. And the character that I brought in for the one is Paul. And the reason why I brought in Paul was because Paul obviously was a great leader in the church, and throughout his ministry, and when he went on his missionary journeys, his focus was very much on spreading the gospel. It didn't really waver whenever he was in front of the all the trials that he went through. His focus and all the things that were good and bad, he was still focused on that one thing. And another reason why was because when he was Saul, before he became Paul, he even admitted in one of his epistles that he was a very zealous Jew, and that wanted to do good. And even though he was wrong when he thought that killing Christians was a good thing, he was still about doing what God wanted him to do. And then that passage in Romans that talks about how the good he wants to do he can't do, because he wants to do all these things, but he just can't do them. And that way, obviously I brought in Christians because they would know the people that I'm bringing in. So kind of based on what I just said, and based on what you know about Paul, do you think that you can relate to him in any way?
And I think that's a really good example of a one, because we can get so, we can get so lost in our own perspective, and we think we're doing the right thing. Then when you, like that moment that you realize, holy cow, I mean, not all of us go around killing Christians, but like that weight when you realize, holy cow, like these are the people that I've hurt this whole time and I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
When I thought that I was helping, that chief of sinners thing right there, like you can just feel so low, and like, who's gonna rescue me from this?
But Paul is a hard driving, pushing, make it happen, get my way, do it my way, with the intellect to back it up. The amazing self-control he had in that storm at the end of that was just incredible. The whole ship was falling apart, and I would have been just panicked. But I mean, I probably would have been for him too, but he was just so strong.
He was a leader, but he was an outsider. He wasn't an apostle. He wasn't a follower of Christ. He didn't inherit his message from Peter or James or John or any of the other disciples. For the most part, they were just regular people. They were tax collectors, they were fishermen, they were etc. He was a Pharisee. He was a well-trained Pharisee, and he was a Roman. He's put him on the outside. And I went to Vanderbilt University. As far as I'm aware, not a single Vanderbilt grad has ever gone to Concordia Seminary before, and I would be shocked if one followed me. And that puts me on the outside. And so on that level, I definitely identify with Paul, because he's on the same team as the apostles. He works with them. He becomes friends with them, but he's always kind of got that outsider track.
I feel like I want to find something in my life that I've been made to do, that I can focus on for my whole life. I don't think I've really found that yet. I feel like Paul was kind of searching for that, and he thought he found it back when he was Saul with what he was doing. He thought it was what God wanted, and he was zealously going around killing Christians. And then once Jesus came and spoke to him and opened his eyes, and his name changed to Paul and all that, he latched onto that mission and went full force for the rest of his life. So I feel like I can kind of relate in that way as well.
In Asian countries, like in Korea, what I can observe about people's life stories is that there is always a turning point where they obey. Like they said that, oh, my life changed because God wants me to do this, but I didn't want to do this, and I ended up doing it, and ended up found out that it was a blessing. And they're saying it in a way that almost convinced me that it is necessary for us to go through a process of feeling not wanting to obey. It's the way that they judge. That's God wants, because I don't want it. It's the fact that I don't want it that I can make sure that it's God's will. There are things that I don't want. For example, I didn't want to be a teacher when I was in high school and college. I didn't want to be a teacher. I didn't know what God wants me to be. in the future. I couldn't see the future. By the time God is calling me into something, I was already ready. I was ready to be obedient. I think that it's a higher force that even I was willing, like my willingness was even in God's control.
But there's theoretically at least a willingness to like course correct if you're going like, oh, something is not good, to then course correct to make sure to change it to what is truly good and what does need to be your goal, which is something I know I strive for. Whether or not it always plays out, or I mean, sometimes it plays out better than others, or there may be things that I'm doing wrong that I feel convicted is good, but I feel like that's something I am ever pursuing within that idea of like always critiquing and self-analyzing and not becoming complacent with what I'm doing or with what I've been told is good. To constantly seek out and truly know what truly is good, so that then I can then fine-tune and encourage some things, or like forsake certain other things and replace them with what truly is good and needs to be done.
I think that's the beautiful part of that, is Paul recognizing that he can't do it on his own, which I think is something that a one needs to recognize in order to get to that healthy place. The only way that I am good is because Christ covers me with his grace. And then I get to live that out. I get to live in that joy and peace that comes from that. It doesn't come from me.
So do you have any Bible verses that are your favorite, that have helped you throughout your life? They don't necessarily have to be talking about, what we've been talking about today. It can be talking about some, the aspects of a one, but they don't necessarily have to. They can just be kind of general.
Isaiah 43, verses 1-7. I've needed to hear when I lose myself in getting caught in my actions and the hurt that I've done, that I've caused, and the pain that I've caused, and those failures that I've had. That message of redemption and the idea that God calls me by name and that I belong to him is amazing, and that he walks with me through that.
Zephaniah 3:17, and so that was a fun one because singing is a big part of my family. Just so to learn that God sings over us was a really cool. It's like we know that God looks after us. He is mighty to save. He delights in us. He quiets us with his love, and all these various aspects that we see throughout the scripture, but we don't hear much about him in terms of like the music aspect. So it was cool to see that even singing, that's something that God rejoices over us with singing.
Matthew chapter 6, I believe it is, where it's like verses about anxiety, like the birds don't worry about where they're gonna lay their nests, and like God takes care of all of them, so he's definitely gonna take care of you even more. And just like the verses at the end of that chapter, like don't think about tomorrow will have its own worries. Just have faith that God's gonna take care of you right now. That's definitely resonated with me quite a bit.
1 Corinthians 2 verse 2, and it's kind of Paul speaking to coming back to what really matters and resting his faith there instead of in his works, instead of in his good, instead of anything in the world. It's in Christ and him crucified. And it's a call back to that, and that's something that when I'm struggling, that's an incredibly reassuring thing for me, that Paul, who had all of this other stuff going for him, like you mentioned earlier, he was a Pharisee of Pharisees, he was a Roman, he was hot stuff. And he said, no, all I need is Christ and him crucified. So that verse has been powerful for me.
Psalm 139, it was talking about God's right hand will hold me fast. I think the reason why it was so important in my life is that sometimes I do hide things that I don't feel secure showing to people, right? Mm-hmm. That's the same with most of the people, but that's pretty obvious in me. That's where I want God to be. That's where I exactly want God to be. I want the light to be in those rooms where I'm shameful about myself.
And so I would say Isaiah 53 on Friday. And I say it out loud, and I meditate on it a lot because, just looking at what Jesus did for us, it makes whatever struggles I'm going through be in perspective.
second to last question. And we've talked about, you just kind of talked about it. We've been talking about it throughout the interview. But how has God played a major role in your life and struggles with some of these aspects we've talked about today?
The biggest thing for me is learning about God's grace. And again, something that I've cognitively known my entire life, right? Like, I can spit back to you, no, I'm saved by grace. So my sins are covered, and all of those beautiful truths. I can say them, I can know them cognitively. In my life, I still try to earn it. And if I don't feel like I'm earning it, I'm very unwilling to receive grace from people and from God. Recognizing that I don't have to be more than I am. I don't have to be different than where I am right now, because Jesus has paid for it completely already. That grace then is a motivation for me to continue to live in grace, right? Like, live loving other people better, even loving myself better.
I never had to have that conversation necessarily of not being brought up with God and then having to feel like this entity exists outside of us and outside of time, and figure out how to process through what does that mean, do I accept this or whatever. Now, I did later in life go through times, and I do on a somewhat regular basis, take myself through those exercises within the right safe environments and with the right people of who is God? Does he really exist? Can we stomach this? Is this something that can conceivably be true? Can we fully surrender to the questionable parts of God's the way he deals with things? Do I accept his sovereignty? It's something that I at every turn have kind of come back to, is like reaffirming that yes, he is real, and yes, it is my life force that I should be in, live in him and such. And so thus always trying to stay with him, stay in prayer and communion, and also reading scripture, and then also staying in prayer and communion with fellow Christians, to have that accountability through spoken word, through reading word, and through divine word, knowing how to work through the struggles, but also the stresses, and also through the good things that you're trying to do and what things you're trying to encourage to be better.
I feel like at certain times he's placed people in my life to where they have good attributes about themselves that God wants me to kind of strive towards, knowing that I'm going to naturally want to try to be at the top and try to take the good I see in other people and do that myself. I feel like there's definitely been times, especially like in college, or I guess with my parents all the way through my life, where he's placed different people there at certain times, so that I can learn and grow from those people. My best times praying, like the times when I like end up like crying and like it completely like changes my whole life and everything, is when I've been so self-critical of something for so long, and then God finally helps me to let it go and to put it on him and to ask for forgiveness and receive that. It's amazing how that feels, and how life-changing it is for me afterwards, and that's happened multiple times.
I think the most powerful way God has worked in my life has been through the people that he puts into it, and through the word that he has brought in the scriptures. For example, my senior pastor from Vicarage, I love that guy. If I were to tell you all the positive things, we'd be here for a month. But I was struggling with that insecurity we talked about earlier a few weeks ago. I was just feeling like, man, I'm not worthy to speak this gospel to anyone. And I was talking to him about it, and he's like, you're right, you're not, but the gospel deems that you're enough. Like, you're not enough, but Christ makes you enough. And he brought that word to me in a time that I needed it. It's through those people, it's through that spoken reality of the gospel to me.
The big role he has played is, over so many years, actually getting it through to me that he loves me and that he accepts me. That's a huge thing, because it's such a vulnerability in my life. And the other thing is just knowing that God has really given us the truth about life, about what has been, what is, what's going to be, about how to live, about what's right and what's wrong. He's given us the word of God, which is the truth.
It is so important for me to have God in my life, or like to know God in my life and to know more about him, because I struggle so much about the idea of things go away, people go away, but the idea of how there is an eternal life that we are looking forward to and that is assured. And it's almost like, hey, you're good. Hey, you're good. And to me, it was like, it settles me down whenever I think of that. And secondly, I think from my Asian self, I'm worried about shame. I don't have any words to describe it, but Jesus has already taken that upon himself and died for it, like died for us. And he was like publicly shamed for things that he has never done. Like every single time when I think of the image of like Jesus walking through that part of his life and like dying on the cross, it tears me up always. That's the major role, like knowing that Jesus Christ has shed blood and made the biggest sacrifice for people like me.
So the last question, still awake, still alive, awesome. The last question is, what encouragement or advice would you give to someone who is also your number?
By committing or saying you're one number, you're not kind of disregarding things that you may have in relation to another number, which was part of my why I was having some hesitance getting into the Enneagram for so long, because some of the questions, you prefer this or this, and I was going, yeah, but those two aren't mutually exclusive, or in situations you typically respond this way or this way, and I was going, I respond pretty equally, it depends on the circumstance. Or just by saying you're one number doesn't mean you're not also elements of another, or yeah, I don't know.
To someone who struggles in the ways I do, who finds joys in the things that I find joy in, I would say hold on to it. We don't need to change. You don't need to set your expectations lower because the world has disappointed you over and over again. And that's not a promise that it's going to get better. I think the world's going to keep disappointing us for the rest of our lives. So on those days where the world is dark and you say, what can I do against such powerful darkness? You can rest in the gospel of Christ. But on those bright days when you're feeling confident, when you're going forward, I would do nothing but encourage you in that. Be a force to live your life with integrity and help encourage others to do the same. Not in a place of an aggression or law, but in a place of kindness and compassion, and a desire to be faithful to what God has put before us. So.
There has to be a deeper understanding about how God is in charge of the universe. I don't need to be that person who's angry. God is in charge of that. Instead of getting all angry or being frustrated, it will happen. You will be frustrated, but we really don't know. However, we can trust. And I think that would be one of the things that ultimately that can answers all of the questions that I have out of the anger about injustice.
Whenever you're having your worst day, it's not as bad as you think it is. It's not as bad as it seems. The answer is always some blend of everything going on. So being a one, it's always tough to see that, but try to look at all the good around you and see that the truth is out there and it's much better than things seem.
You have to look beyond self-sufficiency, because God is the one who can lead and give you the strength, give you the insight for what is really most important about doing what's right. That you're not beating against the wind, that you're being effective. There's a temptation to self-sufficiency, but go past that. Trust in God.
Listen and be open to the real truth, especially the truth of God's love, and recognize that the truth that's true for other people is true for us as well. I believe in high standards for ourselves, and I believe in being the best we can be, but if I don't believe that you have to earn grace, then I don't have to earn it either. And if I believe that Jesus meets you where you are, then Jesus meets me where I am too. There's a rest there and a peace there that, again, we say this at the end of our services all the time, peace that passes all understanding, right? That guards our hearts and minds. And for me, that's what that peace looks like, is just recognizing it's enough. His grace is enough.
Oh, hello. Wow. Just stretching over here, you know. Thank you so much for watching, for going through this journey with me, and I hope and I pray that this this really did encourage you in your faith, that inspires you and reminds you that you are not alone. And it points you back to Christ too. That's important too. The links for the other episodes are down in the description if you want to check those out. So check those out if you would like to. But I hope that this was very encouraging and inspiring for you. So hope to see you soon. See you later.